An unusual announcement for Lieutenant Governor. A South Bend abortion provider closes its doors. Plus, will presidential candidate Mike Pence make it to the Indiana primary, and more. From the television studios at WFYI, it's Indiana Week in Review for the week ending June 9th, 2023.
Indiana Week in Review is made possible by the supporters of Indiana Public Broadcasting Stations.
This week, Micah Beckwith, a conservative pastor from Hamilton County, announced his plan to run for lieutenant governor on Monday. Experts say the bid could be an attempt to move the GOP's gubernatorial candidate farther right on social conservative issues. Lieutenant governor candidates are chosen at the state party convention and often selected by the gubernatorial candidate. This is because, much like presidents and vice presidents, the governor and lieutenant governor run on a single ticket. Indiana University South Bend political science professor Elizabeth Benyon says Beckwith's bid could likely be him pushing for a focus on more conservative issues among state leaders.
He does have a history of spending time, effort, and energy in trying to move the state in a more conservative direction, particularly on social issues.
Party delegates are on the same primary ballot as the gubernatorial candidate, and they are the ones who make the final decision on who will run for lieutenant governor. If Beckwith can get delegates sent to the party convention who support him, there is a chance he could be selected. Will bucking tradition pull Republicans farther right on social issues? It's the first question for our Indiana Week in Review panel. Democrat Elise Shrock, Republican Chris Mitchem, Oseye Boyd, public engagement editor for the Indianapolis Star, and Kaitlin Lange, senior investigative reporter for State Affairs Indiana. I'm Indiana Public Broadcasting digital editor Lauren Chapman in This Week for Brandon Smith. Oseye, let's start with you. Micah Beckwith rose to statewide prominence over protests over Governor Eric Holcomb's response to COVID-19. Is this just the most recent step in the Republican Party responding to that backlash?
I definitely think so. I think Mr. Beckwith is strategic. This is a long-term plan to actually move the party more to the, I don't want to say far right, I'll just say ultra-conservative. We see he's now on the library board. He ran for, 5th Congressional District in, 2020? So I definitely feel like this is a strategic move to actually get some of those issues out in the front. And if he's not going to be the lieutenant governor, which we'll see if that happens or not, but there will definitely be a lot of conversations about issues that he thinks is important.
Yeah, that makes a ton of sense. I mean,
Yeah.
Kaitlin, it was last year, wasn't it? Last year we also saw some shakeups at the state Republican Party convention. Do you think that Beckwith has a play to become the lieutenant governor candidate, even if the nominee doesn't choose him?
Yeah, I think he could. I think what's really interesting is you look at the last Republican convention and you had two candidates that were sort of supported by the more conservative wing of the Republican Party who won, both in Daniel Elliott and then the Secretary of State candidate as well. So I think there is room in the Republican convention to nominate somebody who is more conservative. And I think you will see this play out with the gubernatorial candidates. They're not going to write him off right away, I don't think, because, why would they, and risk alienating that portion of Republican primary voters. I'm sure that the delegates will respect the gubernatorial candidate's wishes, but you never know what could happen in one of these convention fights.
And those delegates are selected on the same primary ballot, too. I mean, it kind of would make sense that if Beckwith has a chance, the gubernatorial candidate that's also selected in that same primary would also likely be aligned with his values. Elise, what does this, from the outside, as the Democrat looking in, what does this say to Democrats in Indiana?
I mean, I don't think it's a surprise. Republicans have basically given the keys to the kingdom to this wing of their party. And it starts not just with some of the convention debates that they have, it starts with gerrymandering and creating districts to where folks like this can come in and have a chance because they are fighting within their own party, rather than the majority of what Hoosiers want. And a lot of these issues that Beckwith is talking about, these aren't the forefront of what everyday Hoosiers are looking for. They want better health care, better access to public health, better education. We're not talking about these issues to try and get by day to day with our families. So this is a real disservice, and I'm not surprised, frankly, that it's happening. and the Republican Party has let it happen.
Yeah, well, I would certainly say is a lot of what Mr. Beckwith is talking about is on the cover of a lot of magazines you're seeing. I mean, you're coming out ever since 2020. His whole point has been, hey, let's get CRT out of our schools. Let's get, more control back into the hands of the people when it comes to emergency rules and mandates and all of those kind of things, which I think speaks to a lot of people, particularly the delegates on the Republican side. I think one thing that really does make it interesting is the position this puts the gubernatorial candidates that are already in place. I mean, if one of them decides to, maybe align with Mr. Beckwith and go with that, while he's lobbying and campaigning to all these different delegates, it's almost like you have a campaign manager out there that is talking to a lot of the further right, but also the most active parts of the party, and that could prove to be very beneficial.
This makes me wonder, too. We've heard more talk this year about lieutenant governor candidates than I think in previous years.
Oh my gosh, yes.
There's been rumors about a Greg Pence, lieutenant governor candidate. So I'm kind of wondering if we'll see more duos come together sooner this year.
I do want to kind of circle back to something that Chris just touched on. I mean, a lot of these issues that we're talking about, vaccine mandates that Beckwith really rose to prominence on, a lot of what he was saying was based on misinformation. CRT in schools, that is also based on misinformation. Public, K through 12 education does not include critical race theory. So I wonder if, for the Republican Party, I mean, does that mean that you're moving farther away from those, kitchen table issues that Elise was kind of pointing to, that Republicans really owned for the last 15 years? Or are we, is the party being moved that way?
Sure, I think there's enough credibility there for them to even be a part of the conversation, right? Like, I think if you compare that to the 2020 election, for example, a lot of that's been kind of dissipated on the other side. But if you look at these issues, I mean, people read the articles, people are still talking about them, and whether the information's there or not, people want to hear your opinion, people want to know kind of how you feel about the issue.
It's also interesting because it's politicized the LG race, which usually we're talking about the governor, right? We're talking about the governor candidates. And the lieutenant governor, I think historically has been someone who can come alongside and take some of the more bread and butter issues, really do some of the work, kind of get things done. And now, and you can say that sometimes about Susan Crouch even, and even she's being pushed further right in the way that she speaks due to this type of environment. So,
and that even points to the job of the lieutenant governor. I mean, the lieutenant governor is over rural affairs and economic development, and has 26 jobs outside of just the state senate president, or overseeing the state senate. I mean, when we're talking about somebody like Micah Beckwith, a lot of the issues that he's touching on have very little to do with what the lieutenant governor job actually does.
Well, I was just thinking, is this a new precedent maybe, and moving away from tradition, but now saying, okay, this is what we want the lieutenant governor to be from here on out, a more active role, and to actually, you don't just choose us, we're going to actually lobby to be in this role. So I'm just kind of curious to see how this plays out once we have the elections, to see if we move that way from here on out.
And to your point, the lieutenant governor position in Indiana is one of the strongest in the country. You mentioned all of the committees and different offices it oversees, but also being the president of the Senate really has a lot of influence. You were among those senators every day. You are coordinating every single session of the Senate. There we go. That was a tongue twister. But that just allows you a lot of access into what not only legislators are debating, but a lot of those behind the door conversations of where things get done. If Mr. Beckwith wanted to in that position, I think he could have a lot of sway even on a lot of legislative things you see.
Which is probably why he wants it.
Not necessarily a good thing.
Which is probably why he wants that position.
Makes a ton of sense.
Yeah.
Moving on, in the midst of legal challenges to Indiana's near-total abortion ban, South Bend's only abortion provider abruptly announced it's closing its doors. WVPE's Marek Mazurek has the story.
This week, Whole Woman's Health Alliance announced it is closing its clinic on Lincoln Way West in South Bend due to Indiana's near-total ban on abortions. In a statement on Monday, Whole Women's Health Alliance called the state's anti-abortion legislation, quote, politically driven and medically unnecessary, end quote. Whole Women's Health Alliance is the only abortion provider in South Bend and is one of 7 clinics in the state. Indiana Republicans last summer passed a law banning abortion in all but a few limited cases. Abortion providers, including Whole Women's Health, sued to block the law from being enforced, and the state Supreme Court is currently weighing the issue.
Kaitlin Lange, Whole Woman's Health President Amy Hagstrom Miller said the closure was due to an environment of hostility. She also said the clinic hadn't seen any patients seeking an abortion since December. Does this closure signal anything greater for Hoosiers around the state?
I think it definitely does. I think what's interesting is the near total abortion ban is on hold right now. It's not even in place, but yet we are already seeing the impacts of it. I was reading, I believe it was an Indiana Capitol Chronicle story from a few months ago about how abortions had dropped by 50% in the state already just because of confusion, that sort of thing. So I think we could, I think it's interesting that the ban is already having an impact, even though, there's no final decision on it yet. And I imagine that we'll see other abortion clinics go this way as well, even before there is a decision made.
Yeah. Oseye, same question, does this signal something greater for Hoosiers across the state?
I think so. I think we are getting what the Republicans wanted. No abortions in Indiana. I mean, at the end of the day, if you have abortion clinics closing, no abortions will happen. So I think that is the goal. You just have, 7 that were open? And so now 6? And no one's going to them because they're confused about what's going on. So eventually I think we're just going to see one by one just closing. They're going to try to hang on, but I think it's going to be over for them.
Yeah. Chris Mitchem, I mean, is this kind of ringing the bell of success for state Republicans?
Yeah, to a certain extent. I think a provision of the bill that they passed last summer that kind of gets overlooked is if you do qualify for abortion in these very small amount of exceptions, you have to go to a facility that is either physician-owned or basically like a hospital setting, right? So they would just remove all of these abortion clinic licenses in the first place. So I think that would require a lot of these clinics to come out and kind of change the tone. And even in this case, I noticed a lot of the comments were stemming around, we can no longer provide abortions. You're lacking abortion care. Well, now we're closing down because we can't provide abortions. I know that other clinics such as Planned Parenthood and whoever else have a lot of other services that just help women in general, whether that be maternal or other reasons. So I think it would kind of require them to have to come in and kind of change the tone and say, hey, we are still needed while we can't provide abortions. We are still needed for access to care for women around the state.
And that's what they've been saying. This is, and I think in a lot of the coverage from this particular closure, we've been seeing that this is not incident-based. This isn't because of a particular case or a particular issue. This is environmental-based. This is because Indiana has created an environment for healthcare that is so hostile that we will not see qualified physicians, and that will affect every single area of care. Why, as a doctor, would you want to come to Indianapolis when you know you are not valued and trusted, no matter what your practice is, and just an environment could close down a clinic at a time when we need way better public health infrastructure, at a time when in May we kicked 55,000 people off of Medicaid due to the unwinding and eligibility requirements? Our public health infrastructure is in high alert. So we cannot afford to create an environment where medical physicians and healthcare workers don't feel like they can come to our state. We need them. Yeah. We need them desperately.
Which again, I think is why the message should be shifted from, instead of just, hooray, we're closing down abortion clinics, instead of being like, hey, how about we reduce or altogether eliminate the services of abortion, but keep these clinics open for everybody. I don't think the goal of the legislation was to come in and say we're just going to remove clinics in rural areas.
I think when you can't control something, then you create confusion.
I'd say that could be a secondary
goal,
effect,
and that has been accomplished, as we can see.
If a building is open, if the building has to close because, quote, we cannot provide enough abortions, I think that is kind of the target of the legislation, right? It's like we don't want these, abortion hubs out in the state that are just performing all of these.
There are not abortion hubs in the state. There are people that offer critical health care to people who need that health care in that moment.
And part of that hostile environment that Hagstrom Miller had brought up was Kaitlin Bernard's medical licensing board decision. I mean, when we're talking about an environment, that seems to be part of that messaging as well, that these are some of those, as Chris was mentioning, those secondary effects of the legislation.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Well, time now for viewer feedback. Each week we pose an unscientific online poll question. This week's question, will Micah Beckwith be the GOP nominee for lieutenant governor? A, yes, or B, no. Last week's question, will Mike Pence place any better than third in any presidential primary? 9% of you said yes, and 91 said no. If you'd like to take part in the poll, go to WFYI.org/IWIR and look for the poll. Former Vice President Mike Pence officially announced his presidential bid on Wednesday. Indiana Public Broadcasting's Violet Comer-Weiland reports whether or not the former governor lasts long enough in a crowded Republican field for Hoosiers to vote for him in the primary is uncertain.
Elizabeth Benyon is Chancellor's Professor of Political Science at IU South Bend. She says Pence holds some of the values of the traditional pre-Trump era Republican, which makes him a popular candidate for some. However, she said with 10 other Republican candidates currently in the running for president, it's too early to tell if he'll make it to the Indiana primaries.
I think it's too early to know whether or not he'll be a viable candidate in May. He is certainly behind other candidates, including Donald Trump and second in line, Ron DeSantis.
She adds Indiana voters are likely very familiar with Pence's leadership style, and he would likely perform well in these primaries, but that voters in other states may be less familiar.
Chris Mitchem, Indiana's primary is one of the last in the cycle, and even then, Pence wasn't particularly popular when he left his 2016 re-election campaign to be Donald Trump's running mate. 8 years later, would Pence be successful in Indiana?
Yeah, I sure hope he gets that far, just because, or even the nomination process in general gets that far, because 2016 Indiana was the center of the world for a day. That was fun. But I think a lot more depends on just whether he gets in. There's going to be storylines along if he does get this far, as in, who is the establishment backing at that point? Is Donald Trump's, latest indictment going to play a factor? Who knows? And of the candidates that have dropped out, who's backing who? Like, he could have a lot of support if he makes it this far. And I think you'll be hard pressed to find a candidate who is actually harmed by his home state. I think it's a matter of fact of whether it helps you a lot or helps you a little bit. And I think he would need a lot of help from Hoosiers in order to be competitive in this race if he gets this far. Yeah. But the idea that being in Indiana would hurt him, I don't think is a factor.
But he clearly doesn't think it's going to help, right? Because he has not done what other Hoosiers have done, Birch Bayh, Dan Quayle, Pete Buttigieg. When they make major announcents, they're proud to be from Indiana, and they make that announcement.
Could be a case, yeah.
In Indiana. That did not happen in this case. His initial candidacy as vice president kind of came out of nowhere. He was losing his gubernatorial race when that happened. Didn't come back for his own presidential announcement. I think that says enough, and he probably won't make it here for us to vote for him.
Yeah, Kaitlin Lange, at the time in 2016, RFRA was fresh on Hoosier minds. Do you think that the effects of that, of the split between opinions on January 6th and the election and everything that came out of 2020, do you think that's going to be a barrier for Mike Pence in Indiana?
It could be. I think it won't be as much RFRA that is a factor this time around, but obviously January 6th. I know even the other day we had included a mention of Mike Pence in our newsletter because saying he was going to the Indy 500, and I had somebody email me, mad that we had included a traitor in our newsletter. This is a Republican saying this. So I just think that goes to show that there are people in Indiana who are very frustrated with him. Who knows what will happen. To Elise's point, I do think it's interesting that he announced in Iowa, I think partially because that might be one of the easier paths to candidacy these days because Indiana is so late in the primary process.
Campaign starts now.
And we saw Pete Buttigieg, he did well in Iowa, so I'm wondering how much of that Pence is trying to replicate with his decision to do so.
That makes sense. Will Mike Pence be a home state hero if he gets this far in the presidential primary?
I don't think he's going to get that far. I know 2016 was a long, long time ago. People don't remember RFRA 2016, but they do remember January 6th. And to your point of being called a traitor, people have not forgotten that. That was close enough. People have not forgotten that yet. As I said last week, Pence is not a firebrand. He has a lot of competition who has a lot more personality, and they're bringing a lot more heat than what he has. So I'm just not so sure that he's going to make it to Indiana. So if he does, I will be surprised, and I will come back and I will say Pence did make it. I was wrong, but but I'm just not seeing it happen for him.
That makes sense. A Republican-led effort in Congress tightened work requirements for the Temporary Assistance for Needy Families program, also called TANF. Just a few months prior, Indiana Republicans passed a state law to expand the program. Indiana Public Broadcasting's Adam Yahia Reyes reports the law's author says he worries the federal change may counteract that expansion.
Republican State Senator John Ford tried for years to raise the income threshold and increase monthly payments for TANF in Indiana. He finally succeeded this past legislative session, bringing the state's first major increase to the program since the 1980s.
With inflation, I think really people realize that the price of diapers, for example, went up almost 300% since 1988.
New, tighter federal TANF work requirements kick in just before Indiana expands eligibility in 2026. Ford and others say the change will likely prevent many families from getting the small but meaningful payments.
20% of the kids in my community are in poverty. I just think that is ridiculous in today's day and age. And I think TANF plays a role in getting these kids out of poverty.
It's too early to estimate how the federal change will affect Indiana.
Elise Shrock, Senator John Ford said that change in work requirements is, quote, a difference in philosophy between state lawmakers and the Republican counterparts. Do you think that's the case?
Well, I honestly reject the whole premise that work requirements are necessary. First of all, from an administrative perspective, they cost the state more than it would cost to implement the program. And that's kind of a recurring history with Republicans in the state, same with free and reduced lunch, free with a number of other things that we do in this state where we just need to get people help. And then administratively, we put so many constraints on that help, it actually costs taxpayers more money for less help. Back to the point at hand with work requirements. The fact of the matter is these folks are working. These folks are working. They are just not making enough to get by right now. And especially most of this is affecting kids, like Senator John Ford in the last spot said. Yeah. These are kids. We're not expecting them to work. These are their families. They're trying to get by. It is a long time coming for this type of increase. Senate Democrats have been proposing it for over a decade now. So we need to change how we are talking about this. I do think there is a dissonance right now that could really affect how people get the help they need.
Yeah. Chris Mitchem, I mean, is there that dissonance, though, between what Indiana state lawmakers are trying to do and their Republican counterparts in Congress?
I don't think that big of one. I mean, the proposal that Elise was talking about that passed unanimously this year, thankfully, was just, I think, a recognition from Republicans that, hey, our TANF program just is not up to par. I think we were ranked in the bottom 10 of kind of how much of the money actually gets to families. So I think that was kind of a wake-up call when you look at it in the background of inflation as well, of being like, hey, we need to get these people more help. And I think, when it comes to work requirements and being eligible for these, Indiana typically doesn't have too much of an issue of making sure that you meet each criteria, and I think that's ultimately what Congress is trying to ensure other states do as well.
Yeah. I mean, Oseye and Kaitlin, do either of you have a whole lot to talk about with TANF? I mean, it seems to be a little bit more of that partisan, or not necessarily partisan, but that state and federal dissonance.
Well, I think the work requirement thing, we saw that come into play with Bill Clinton, and it's been in play ever since. And you're right, Elise. People who are on TANF for the most part work. Poor people work hard. They just happen to not make a lot of money. Why don't we go out to the corporations and the businesses that don't pay enough, so then that they are required to be on, that need help from taxpayers? I think we need to have that conversation at some point, but that's not your question. So let me let me come back. But I think I mean, you're only if you have one child, I think you're just getting $229 a month, and it's been like that for how many years, since the 80s?
Yeah,
decades.
$288 for 2 kids. So how does one live? How do you think one is getting rich and living off of that, especially in light of inflation right now? So we need to have a different conversation as well. But the work requirements, they're already doing that. They already have that in place. So I don't know how that would really change. But Senator Ford is right. There are a lot of poor kids in our state. So what are we going to do about that?
Kaitlin, anything to add? Yeah,
I think I would just point out that my understanding is that that we're only at 12% of families of households that meet the work requirement in Indiana. So we aren't meeting that 50%
Yeah,
that's
yeah.
required, that would be required federally. So I do think it will impact us here
Yeah.
a lot. It would, regardless of whether Indiana lawmakers are passed this new bill. So I do think it is something to look at, that even in a conservative state, run by Republicans, we aren't even close to that 50% mark. So this is very much going to impact Indiana, regardless of if lawmakers wanted to.
And finally, Fishers, a suburb of Indianapolis, recently announced a new public beachfront park in the affluent Geist Reservoir area. To discourage people who don't live in Fishers from using the park, the Fishers City Council approved a parking fee for non-residents of $50 per day. Oseye, what would be a better way to keep out non-residents? Armed guards, a moat, a wall on the southern border of Hamilton County off of 96th Street? What do you say?
I say a wall and a moat. Let's just go ahead and let people know that we don't want them coming, and keep them out, and keep us out, keep them in, whatever. But it definitely sends a signal of people are not wanted.
Yeah.
$50 to park?
Listen, I'm going to be looking for
Yeah,
other
I was
places
gonna
to
say,
park.
People,
Yeah.
by the way, who complain
If
about
you're a
parking in
resident, you're
downtown
fine.
Indy.
I can walk.
Yeah, and you bring that up about the parking downtown. People complain about that, but you're saying $50? That's an extreme amount of money.
That's an extreme amount, and that's Indiana Week in Review for this week. Our extremely well-dressed panel is Democrat Elise Shrock, Republican Chris Mitchem, Oseye Boyd of the Indianapolis Star, and Kaitlin Lange of State Fairs, Indiana. You can find Indiana Week Review's podcast and episodes at wfyi.org/IWIR or on the PBS app. I'm Lauren Chapman of Indiana Public Broadcasting. Join us next time because a lot can happen in an Indiana week.
The opinions expressed are solely those of the panelists. Indiana Week in Review is a WFYI production in association with Indiana's public broadcasting stations.